Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the service. For those who have cell phones or pagers, you can turn it to the silent mode. The weather is a little hot. Right behind you, there's a can with water and some cold towels. Please use it. Do not try to be brave and stick through it. There's also ice water on that side. It's frozen still, but we'll have some water here and some nice towels. Please use it. If you need help in anything, just let me know. Officiating today is Rabbi David Flinkenstein.
Begin with making the blessing at a cemetery. Just respond Amen afterwards. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yotzer eschem badin v'zon v'chilken eschem badin v'hemis eschem badin v'yedim isper kulchem badin v'hu osu l'hachayeschem v'l'kayim eschem badin Baruch atah Adonai mechaya hamesim. Ato gibil madan mechayim mesim ato rav lehishia v'chal kol chayim b'chesed mechayim mesim b'rachmim rabim seim b'chneflim v'refechel matir asur mekam rosal l'sheni ofor blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who fashioned you with justice, nourished and sustained you all with justice, took your lives with justice, knows the sum total of you all in justice, and will restore and resuscitate you in justice. Blessed are you, Lord, who revives the dead. Please join me in saying Psalm 23. I'll first recite it in Hebrew. Please join me if you know it in Hebrew, and then we'll recite it together in English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo yechsar, v'neizdeshe yabitzeni am menuchas in ahaleni. Nafshi yesheviv yancheni magli tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech v'geitz hamoves lo ira ra ki ato imodi. Shivtocho mishantecho heimo yinachamuni. Tarech lefonai shulchan neged tzoroi dishanta v'shem roishi koiser revoya. Achtoi v'cheser defuni koyim echayo v'shavt beveis Adonai le'orech yomim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I will continue on with Psalm number 1. I know the weather is a bit challenging, but this psalm is very, very apropos for Stephen. Happy is the one who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the paths of sinners, nor sat in the company of the scornful. Rather, that one's delight is in the Torah of the Lord, meditating in God's ways day and night. He will be like a tree planted by streams of water that yield in fruit in its season. Not so the wicked who are like chaff. Who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? One who walks in purity, does what is righteous, speaks the truth from the heart, who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor casts disgrace towards a neighbor, in whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of God, who swears truthfully even to personal hurt, and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe on the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. Dear friends, family, as so many of us are here today, gathered to pay tribute to Dr. Stephen Vogel, Shmuel Nutke ben Sender V'Rochel, let us remember the words of the wisest of all men, King Solomon Shlomo HaMelech, as he encapsulates all of the traditions of mourning in just 4 simple words: V'hachai yiten el libo, and the living shall take to heart. A funeral is never a time that is scheduled, nor convenient, nor can we predict the weather conditions. But it becomes a priority. We put everything else on hold. Time stops, we stop running, we put our lives on pause. It's a time of reflection. It's a sober moment to appreciate the value, the sanctity, significance, and frailty of life in general, and more specific today, to pay tribute and to learn from the life of Stephen Vogel. Modern physics has taught us that no substance truly disappears. It only changes its form. Matter is another form of energy, energy in matter. If this applies to the physical, how much more so when we talk about the human soul, life itself, which is spiritual. Therefore, real comfort, nechama, is not when we forget or minimize the loss. As we say, time heals all wounds. But when there is a paradigm shift, and the paradigm shift begins now, it begins with how we define what we're experiencing. The world calls it a funeral. In Hebrew, it's called levaya. Funeral comes from the original word in French. It's etymologically rooted with the word la fin, the end. It's the end, it's the last hurrah, the last event. In Hebrew, it's levaya, to escort, which implies that there's another stage in life. The neshama, the soul, the essence of life itself continues. It continues in a higher form. Our relationship to the soul changes. As the precious neshama and soul of Dr. Stephen Vogel once lived among us, he will now have to live within us. And the living shall take to heart. As we reflect upon King Solomon's words, let us reflect upon Stephen's special and unique qualities as they become lessons in our life that he continued to live within us. I'd like to call upon Stephen's son John to please share some words with us.
I wanted to start by thanking people, by thanking all of you. Thank you to everyone who is here today to honor a truly extraordinary man. And to everyone who has been here over this past month, who've been so supportive of my dad and the rest of us. Your love and your presence have helped me and my family just immeasurably. little extra for Erica. I know this has been painful for you too. But without you and your support, the wheels would have fallen off miles ago. I've always considered myself lucky in life from the start. And I knew this starting early because my folks always told me so. You're in the lucky sperm club, they would say, mostly to keep us kids humble and grounded about the life that was provided to us. And I think about that a lot, but none of it would mean anything without the family I've had and without the father I was so lucky to have. Born in Buffalo, New York, exactly 9 months after victory in Europe, to Henry and Rosalind, young Stephen was a smart alecky kid, a pesky little brother to Jane, and way too smart for his own good. Getting caught hitchhiking, picked up smoking by age 11, hanging out with the out crowd at school. He was, starting at an early age, always going against the grain. He got in trouble in school a lot, I think because it was easy for him. Science and really more literature piqued his interest more than pedestrian things like sports or parties. His counselor advised him to go to Harvard or Hopkins. And my father made a point of avoiding places that had quotas. He wanted a more exciting and intellectual environment, so he went to Columbia in New York, where he studied Spanish literature, of all things, to enrich himself as he prepared for a career in medicine. He idolized his father, and so following in Henry's footsteps, he went into training to become a surgeon in Buffalo, which he did for a year before enlisting in the Air Force. Now, his father, Henry, back in 1939, had also enlisted after his medical training. But his was with a desire to contribute to the war effort, which my grandfather did for 6 years in the Pacific. But Vietnam was a different war, and Dad was perfectly happy that he got stationed at Hancock Field in Syracuse, where he served as a physician at the base. And about those years, Steve was fond of quipping with that familiar chip-toothed grin of his, that he had proudly served, bravely battling communism to protect the people of upstate New York. Now, serendipity is a word that he liked, and it was actually in those years of service that he found his calling. To make some money, and more so to fight off boredom, he would spend his nights moonlighting in local hospitals. And back then, there was something new emerging called emergency medicine. Steve found that he loved it. He loved the variety, the challenge, the unpredictability, the pace. And I also think that little bit of rebellion of choosing something new and different and being a pioneer. At the time, there were only a handful of residency programs in the country for ER. So after the Air Force, that's what brought him here to Evanston, where he made his career. Now, as you can imagine, stories abound from the ER days. But what I always think of when I consider his professional life is the people along the way. The docs who I met when I was just a kid, who are the same ones who were visiting him in the hospital this past awful month. And now, while I could say I wouldn't be too upset if I never had to step foot in Evanston Hospital ever again, and anyone who's had to endure a modern hospital stay would know that it doesn't always go so smoothly. But in truth, I was thankful that that's where he got his care. I was deeply touched to see over and over again the respect and the reverence that he built for himself there. Of course, that started in the ER when we arrived just 5 weeks ago, where his doctor, a man who was closer to my age, who I didn't know, was so visibly pained himself. His dad was in pain. And we were suspecting and really knowing already about the cancer there. Doctor made a point. He wanted to bring me to the back area where there were pictures of the ER docs from over the years, with Dad and some of the other originals featured. He just wanted to show me his appreciation, his admiration. And over the next few weeks while we were there, we would see more of that, including the last doctor I met there, a palliative care physician who trained at Evanston and told me he considered my father a mentor. I have to admit, I wasn't just touched by all this. I I felt pride. Something he would never express about himself. This was a curtain call. A much-deserved curtain call. Now, there's a bit more to the story than just his great career. Back in Buffalo in 1964, that's 59 years ago for anyone counting, he was set up on a blind date with a 16-year-old working-class girl from North Buffalo named Esther Strasberg. He took her golfing that day, which may have been the last time he ever played, but it was the beginning of one of the greatest bonds you'll ever see. Mom, you two were awfully good together. Awfully cute, too. Now, Dad, my father, was not exactly the come home with a dozen roses kind of a guy, but it was real love. So much warmth and compassion and kindness for each other. They're partners in the truest sense. 54 years of marriage is a lot, but in this case, there could never be enough. He was the father to Michelle, too, a woman everyone keeps underestimating. Michelle is the product of amazing, caring, loving, supportive parents. And she had a very special bond with my dad. The unspoken language they had was always ongoing. And I know they really understood each other and the ways they were feeling. Of course, they had those cats together. And to Lucy and Milo, he was Papa. It's funny how my kids are so different from each other, and yet I see so much of my dad in both of them. Just different sides. I see it in Lucy's wry wit, sharp insights, and distrust for anything popular. With Milo, I can see Dad's mischievousness and that devilish grin and his lively spirit, that same twinkle in his eyes. And with you both, I see his easy smile and warmth. It was far too short, but I'm happy you were able to know him and him you. And I know you'll always carry him with you. And then there's the friends. Steve always kept rather good company. There have been great friends, friends who he considered family, family who he considered friends. And I have to say, I struggled here with things to write about Steve's close friends, and I think it's because you all got to know him in a way that a son really doesn't. I'm gonna say I'm a little jealous about that, but I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you who got to be close for him over the years, and I'm thankful for you for being his friends. So I'm just gonna say this. Hope that while you're all here now, that you can provide comfort for one another and take some time to really reminisce about all you had together. Of course, lastly, he was my dad. Like him, I also idolized my father, with good reason, I would say. He was not the macho, barking kind of man. He was the real kind. The one whose calm and steady hand was the one you want on the wheel, keeping us safe, guiding us on the right path. You sometimes hear some men lament about looking at themselves through their father's eyes and looking to avoid that. For me, it was never a problem. As a man, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a physician, Steve Vogel is one hell of an example. And it was by example that he led us as a father. Integrity was important to him. Not that he had to say it. Mischievous as he could be, I never once caught him lying. I never once saw him be selfish. Doing the right things by others in life, it was not a choice, it was just something you did. He was known as being a realist, for sure. And he would joke, people think I'm a cynic, but really I'm just a sour realist. Like a lot of what he said, it was funny and it was true. But it was not the whole truth. Steve was no fool. And he spoke sometimes of the harshness in the world and the darkness of men, but he did not live his life or approach people that way. He was kind to others, always. He was generous. He listened to people, and he really heard them. He put people at ease. I think that might have been his greatest talent. For a man who generally avoided anything social, he really did enjoy people, and he cared about them. Dad, I've really been so lucky and privileged to have you as my father. I'm never good at goodbyes, so Dad, I'm going to borrow from your own words. When we would all part ways. Dad, Pax Tecum and Pax Vobiscum.
John, as you mentioned about serendipity, as we all here to pay tribute to Stephen's life and to learn from Stephen's life, I can't help but think about that the time that we are here under the sun in sweltering heat on the hottest day of the year, who can remember until when, we are here now experiencing what Stephen lived in his entire life, which is going out of one's comfort zone. And so here we are indulging in going out of our comfort zone to learn from Stephen. I'd like to first begin by asking for forgiveness, mechila. As traditional as one should ask for forgiveness. If anyone in any way wronged Stephen, now is the time to request for forgiveness. And personally, there's no way I can encapsulate a life like this in just a few words. But let's learn about the qualities of his life, especially as we are just a few short weeks before the high holidays of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, when we soul search and make commitments to a better new year. As mentioned, Stephen possessed a very rare gift. The ability to forge relationships and instantly connect with others. That affinity to make every person that you connect feel like a friend, feel like they've known you forever, a kinship. This is because Steve was genuine. Making someone else feel special without being pretentious. Even though he was brilliant off the charts, yet making everyone feel comfortable with who they are. This comes together with devotion, an incredible devotion. Devotion to his calling, devotion to his relationships, and his unwavering relationship, beginning with a friendship with Esther, at the age of 18, blossoming to love for decades. It all began with some handwritten letters, which were shared, that they were so incomprehensible that Esther had to show them to her mom to read them. Obviously, this was an early sign that he was destined to become a physician. As mentioned, he was a dedicated and attentive listener, to give reassurance to patients in the most difficult and challenging of circumstances in the ER. What that took was an incredible presence of mind. In the language of the mystics, the Alter Rebbe explains that this is the concept that every human being has the capacity to do. The human being was created different than an animal. We all have a brain, we all have a heart. An animal walks on all fours with a heart and the brain is on the same level. The human being walks upright, where we have the ability, the unique ability, where the mind could rule over the impulses of the heart. And so while we're in an emergency room and panic ensues, you needed someone like Stephen, who had the incredible presence of mind, compassionate, yet the mind being able to rule over the fear of the heart, to put not only himself at ease, but to put others at ease. Beyond the walls of the hospital, Stephen's vibrant spirit could not be contained. His infectious love for humor ignited laughter to anyone around him. And this especially to his dear, dear family, to his dear children, Michelle, Jean, Erica, his precious grandchildren, Lucy and Milo. His joie de vivre was something that was infectious. He could never sit still. Even being in the ER as having 3 days off during the week. Stephen launched Inspi Associates. This was driven not for financial gain, but in order to truly make a difference in other people's lives. His whole purpose was to uplift others. Even though, being in the ER for decades, he could have easily sought to get the spotlight, to earn higher titles, a higher position. Instead, he uplifted others, not only his patients, but he uplifted his colleagues. He gave them room to flourish, or others, as it was put, to get them out of the way, to let him do what he needed to do. His wisdom was equally balanced, being irreverent when it was called for, and deeply serious when necessary. With this comes the quality of humility. And this quality of humility is something we can all internalize because it is often misdefined. Humility is not thinking less of oneself. It's thinking of oneself less. It's really thinking about, like in the words of Dr. Viktor Frankl, the question that we should always ask ourselves: is my purpose to live, or am I living with purpose? Stephen lived with purpose. And with that, he was able to reach a deepest level of humility, of one thinking not about what do I need, but thinking about what am I needed for. And that's why, even on the most difficult, challenging circumstances, he didn't feel uncomfortable, because his whole life mission was with purpose. And the words of the ethics of our fathers: who is beloved by God? Who is loved by others? Is there anyone who didn't have affection for Stephen, who was not uplifted by Stephen, who felt love? To be here on these conditions, to pay tribute to Stephen. So, such a person of perfection, did he have any flaws? Well, he hated green vegetables. In his words, why eat something that turned green? He was so dedicated to others. As I'm here, I can't help but remembering and remarking that he is buried next to one of his dearest and closest friends, Alfred von Samek, who I officiated at this very spot. And I'll recall the menorah which is on his tombstone, which his passion was about bringing light to others through the light of the menorah, which is throughout the world. That particular menorah, Stephen's life, in many different ways, was about bringing light to others. And as just this menorah has You see, there are 8 branches. There are many branches to a menorah. Each one of us here is part of that menorah. Each one of us here is a light. Each one of us here must light up the darkness in the world. But I must say, Stephen was not just a light. He was that shamish. The shamish is the servant candle. That servant candle, no blessing is made over the servant candle. When you ask what night of Hanukkah is it, that light is not part of the count, because a servant candle brings light to others without being counted themselves. But by living such a life, they are elevated far beyond any other person. So as we pay tribute to Stephen, let us internalize these very important messages to instill within our lives. Stephen, may you be a good Tibeter, an advocate to your dear family, to Esther, who still needs your support. You went and you left way too soon. Be with her. Give her the strength that she needs. Bless her. Advocate for her for a long life. For your dear children, Michelle, John, and Erica, and your precious grandchildren, Lucy and Milo, who will go in your footsteps and make you proud. May his soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. As the Aron, the casket, is being lowered, let us reflect upon these values to internalize them in our own life.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, as the casket is being lowered, for those of you, if it's too hot for you, have a lot of water behind you, some cold wet towels, please do not be brave and try to brave through this heat. Take a drink of water and then you'll come back.
Thank you, sir. In life, we all receive and we all give. Yet, there are some people who give in order to receive. And then there are people who receive just in order to give. As Stephen was such a person, we are inspired now to do a special mitzvah. And that mitzvah is what's referred to as chesed shel emes, a true kindness, a kindness that we're not looking for any repayment. And that is, just as a child wants to be tucked in at night and tucked in by dear parents to feel that trust, to overcome any fear. As Stephen is being laid to rest, let's take the opportunity of tucking him in. Let's take the opportunity of not passing on the responsibility of burial, of internment upon strangers. But all those who felt his love can take part in this mitzvah. I know it's difficult and challenging in this heat, but it's another way of going out of our comfort zones to do a mitzvah for Stephen. We just begin with the earth, which is from the Mount of Olives. It's part of Jewish tradition that interment is only a temporary state until the coming of Mashiach, when then there'll be the revival of the dead. And this revival of the dead begins with the Mount of Olives, and therefore traditionally we include earth from the Mount of Olives in every Jewish burial. Then for those who would like to take part in the interment itself, the instructions how to do so, we take 3 shovelfuls of earth. We first begin by an unusual way. We take the shovel backwards to indicate that it's not something we look forward to. And then we put 3 shovels of earth in the ground. And then we do not pass the shovel from one to another, as we do not pass along grief to one another. And we also take our own initiative in doing this mitzvah. So we put the shovel in the ground, giving the opportunity for each person to take their own initiative.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the rabbi mentioned, for those who want to participate in the burial, you do so once the cemetery workers have placed the vault lid on. And then for those in attendance, please walk to the approach the grave. And again, I don't have to tell you this, please do not overdo it. Just do what you can, and then we'll run back underneath the tent. And for those that feel the need, if they need to leave, it's too hot for them, it's okay to leave. Don't, again, overdo it. Again, for those who want to participate in the burial, you may do so from either side of the mound. We'll begin with the family and then with extended family and friends. Please watch your step as you approach the grave. Step on the boards.
After 9 hole, I give up. I did yesterday. So stupid. So stupid. After 9 hole, I said, now what's
They made me some time, but I rather see what I got there.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, for those who want to sign your register book and didn't get an opportunity, the register book is out here. Again, we'll have the extended family and friends who want to participate may go up to the graveside and place some earth into the grave.
צדקת אדוני לחמס וחכיס אשר יוד חפיק דין כל רוחס חול לא חוז יפים למחייז וינו איננו נחל ברחם לא לבקוחס כל אדוני רחם הסליחס אדוני שון יהיה אייל שון יחיה מה יסול לק יהיה ברוך דיין המס מסם חיה ברוך הוא כמס דין אי משת אקל באין אי משאל על אדם חבר ודין הקל ישמי היידוי ליתנו דיין אדוני כיצד משפטך תית בדברך בסיס משפטך להר אחם משפטך צדקת אדוני ויושר משפטך tain אמס שפט צדיק אמס ברוך דיין המס שכל משפטך צדיק אמס נפש בחב ידך צדיק מורים חב ידך רחם וכזה ידך בסימן מעלה חרף ידך גוד גדול אית ורב יא שינך בקופס כל דרך ידום נאס איש ותרח כמלול נגש אדוני תורי בלוס ביד נאס ולא קשון ברח מדינה ברחם חבר יאש בסיבול השלב
We're going at the same rate. They were here for the same reason. He's the one that actually stuck by Justin and pushed him. As far as emergency room, I did maybe.
your son-in-law a couple weeks ago?
Oh, really?
Yeah, our congregation's helping me with a couple of things.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, once you had an opportunity to place some earth into the grave, we ask you to join the family back underneath the canopy. For those that the weather and the climate is affecting you, you may go back to your cars.
Yeah, he gave me some good advice. So how are you?
Pretty much one too. So I had a big crowd every day. But infrequently. But in the meantime, I'm doing the voter work for JCFS. For CBLS.
Yeah.
Volunteer Legal Assistance Foundation. So I'm interviewing take class. It's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
So, you mentioned that there's, I'm saying no. There's a clinic
Yeah. Not that the knees are not the toughest. Yeah. When they get, you play master. That's how I learned that. That's my memory of it. Dave?
We met him when I was working in Brooklyn and we had to see him. Yeah, see him at various things. He had to go out and Rabbi yeah, this guy was like, yeah, and you know, the way it's the whole thing of tucking deep in, you know, we're tucking You are not. You are not. Okay, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah, we'll be fine. They walk.
Oh, really? Oh, that's the concession you're going to do, right?
Usually that's more like
And you live across the street.
I'm not happy to see you here very simply. Did you didn't get a text? You didn't know. He had
I wish it was like that. His clients would go into vacation.
introduce yourself. I mean, I'm sorry you didn't get to meet him. You would have liked to.
A lot of discussion about him in the circles. Is that, let me ask you a question.
Immediately. Immediately when he was killed, when I walked in. And then if you go down at the end there, Solomon, that's my father, 18 graves from my father's day. So that's why we wanted to keep it all together.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we will gather in the tent, go behind the family. All right. Send the work, finish filling the grave, and the rabbi will just including fire.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, if we can all gather back here, the rabbi will lead us with the concluding prayers. Again, ladies and gentlemen, there's some water and some cold towels behind you. At the conclusion of the interment, the family will be going back to their home, 2023 Beechwood in Wilmette, where they'll be there for the remainder of today till 8:30, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 11 to 7 p.m.
We'll conclude now with the Kelmo Lerachamim, concluding memorial prayer. Lerachamim, Sheichei Miroimim, Hamsim Nuchanecheinu al Kanfei Ashchina, V'maleis Kadeshim V'Teherim Kezir Arkiem Azhirim Es Nishmas, Shmuel Notke Ben Sender Sheholach Leilomoi, Bavu Shonim Espalim V'Adas Koros Nishmosei, V'Gan Nedim Teminu Chosei Lachem Lerachamim V'Yastirei B'Seisek Knofav Leilomim, V'Yitzrei B'Tzarachayim Es Nishmosei Adonai Hu Nachalosei, V'Yanucha B'Sholom V'Shkovei V'Neimar Amen. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant proper repose in the sheltering wings of your presence and the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament onto the soul of Shmuel Notke ben Sender and Rachel, who has gone to his world, and in whose memory we pray and give charity. May his repose be in Gan Eden in paradise. May the Master of Compassion bring him under the cover of God's wings and bind his soul in the bond of life. May the Lord be his heritage, and may repose on his resting place in peace. And let us all respond, Amen. Now conclude with the Kaddish. Also would like to acknowledge, as mentioned before, about Alfred Van Samek. I did not realize, but I was just pointed out to me that he passed away on August 24th, 13 years ago. Here's the Shalom to have an idea.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the service. It's customary for friends and extended family to form an aisleway leading away from the grave as we offer the mourners their traditional words of condolence. So if we can form an aisleway over there where 2 rows of friends and family facing each other, and then the immediate mourners will walk through. And again, Shiva is at 2023 Beechwood at the family residence until 8:30 this evening. You can leave all the garbage here. It's fine.
I'll text you this.
That was a great listen to John. John made it great. John made it great. And I'm sure you hope no? Did you edit it? Oh, we just rolled up. Hey, these plans and this.
We're going to have the meeting mourners walk this way.
comfort. המקום ינחם אסתם בסוף שער אבלי ציון ירושלים. God comfort you among all the borders of Zion and Jerusalem.